Welcome everybody to the June board meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. The first thing I want to do is formally introduce our new director who is here for his first meeting, Robert Smullins. If there's anybody here who doesn't know him, he's been on the job 2-3 weeks and already has pretty much taken control, and we're very happy to have him. So welcome. Second piece of business was alluded to. We have a resignation of one of our board members. Oh, you don't have the letter.
I can go get it if you don't.
No. That's all right.
I left it out in the car.
Robert.
More.
That's, I didn't write that down. See what happens when I don't write names down? Robert Moore has resigned. I assume effective immediately. So we now have 2 openings on the board. So when we do roll call, I guess we're going to reluctantly accept his resignation and thank him for his service. And having done that, roll call, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman. Mark Finkel.
Here.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
David Bergstress.
Here.
Anthony Netto.
Here.
Jeffrey Rosenthal.
Here.
Robert Moore has resigned. Robert Smullins.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hodgson.
Here.
Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
Richard Ferrari. Here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Motion to adopt or revise our meeting agenda, and I need to revise it to go into a brief executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss labor contracts.
I'll make the motion to amend as you have indicated.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Where do you want
wait.
that though, Mr.
We'll do it at the end. We'll do it at the end because there'll probably be no action coming out of that meeting.
Okay.
I have no guests to introduce, but we do have a public comment period, and I'd like to call on Kevin Cobianco is asked to speak to the board.
Okay, right here. Please, if you will. I just need you as close to this mic as possible. You're good.
Members of the board, Kevin Capobianco, I'm here on behalf of some action taken at last month's meeting due to some involvement with neighbors on the lake. I'm here on behalf of Connie Edwards, who resides at 156 Lakeside Drive in Mayfield. Last month I chose not to get involved in the process of what was going on because I believed it needed to take place. Since your action, I have then been in contact with Mr. Hodgins, and since some public information has been passed out about the incidents on Lakeside Drive, I felt the need to come up and talk a little bit personally about what had happened. I have talked to Mr. Hodgins. What kind of drove this now was just the press putting in the actions that had taken place. And what was left out of that meeting is something that when I finally looked at the packet that you all had privilege to, I got a copy from my mother-in-law. I noticed that one key piece, in my opinion, was missing from that document, and that was both Mr. Sean Oakley and, I don't know Bill's last name, sorry, had told, Gizzy, had shared with Mr. Hodgins and maybe some other staff that, you know, Connie had nothing to do with this process. So she essentially came home and there was some equipment and, you know, work was started. She also, and I made copies of it, I know you have it, I don't know if you want it for separate documents. She also wrote a letter to the board stating that of the same. My father-in-law, who typically controlled all of these actions and all the stuff that I had to deal with for him, never really brought to my attention or said to me, hey, listen, I'm thinking about doing these things at the lakes. I mean, there was always the hypothetical questions and comments about, you know, moving the dock and things like that and what had to be done because of it. But I was not aware of either that he, Bill, and Sean, and I think 2 other parties, had put in for this work process to be done, and that it was denied. What I copied for you was his timeline. I was my father-in-law's medical proxy, okay? You sent a denial letter that was in that packet for March 14th. He was dead a month later. He had terminal brain cancer, okay? I printed my calendar to show you the timeline of what we were going through with him because it's not something that he shared. And for a man who shared a lot of information and was well respected in the community, I think if there was things that he thought were wrong or shouldn't be done, it would have been on his mind, and he would have said, hey, listen, if this ever comes up, don't do this. But my mother-in-law shared with me everything and what was going on. She was very adamant that, hey, listen, you know, I really don't know what they're doing, but what do you think? And I said to her, well, they're already doing what they're doing. You know, I don't know the scope of what they're doing. And it was then, having talked to them, said, well, we had a permit, but it was denied. They've always been good.
The
Yes, sir.
people you were working with, those two neighbors said to you, we have a permit?
No, when they started doing the working, that's when I was down there. That's Saturday morning, and that's when I finally had heard that they had a permit that was denied. That's up until then I had no knowledge. So as the work is commencing, so they're there, you know. I mean, at that point they're digging, you know. I mean, I'm a kid at Jello Iron. I like to watch, you know. I'm guilty of that, no doubt about it. I don't hide from that. Up until that point, we had no knowledge that my mother-in-law had no knowledge. I didn't have any knowledge of it. You know, I'm just kind of the guy that takes care of the family now. That's my role. The reason I came back up today separately, and as I spoke last month, my only reason for speaking last month was because they've always been good neighbors. I cannot take that away from them. What they did was wrong. They both are apologetic to the tilt. I know they're working to try to resolve it. They tell me they're working to resolve it. I have no interaction with what they're doing, but they're communicating with me that they're trying to resolve it and they're moving forward and they think they're making progress. My goal last month, as I stated in the public meeting, was that they've always been good neighbors. They were very helpful for my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and everything that they were going through. That being said, you took action and you revoked Connie Edwards' permit. Connie has been upstanding from day one. Her husband, Doug, upstanding from day one. I would render his history and credibility against anybody's. It was not the intention of Connie, Doug, or myself being involved in this to stub any noses. But I will ask, and I think it's only fair that, having known that, and I think Mr. Hodgins would say that that's been the statement from the get-go, that she had nothing to do with this, that it'd only be fair that she be allowed to have her permit access. I understand why you did it, and I support to a degree that decision because it's a scope of work in an area. But knowing that she had nothing to do with it, I can only plead her case. I can only show the timeline that I don't believe, as she's telling me, that she had no knowledge of this. If you'd like to see, proof of death and calendars, that's what I made copies of.
I don't need to see that.
That's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
You said you went down and just watched? You didn't participate in any of
My docs were out there.
dirt work?
So essentially, Sean called me and said, listen, can you unbolt your docks? We got to move them. At that point, Bill's area had a significant amount of work already being done. So, I'm guilty of being a neighbor that went down there and, hey, you got equipment? I couldn't move them on my own. They could lift them and move them.
Okay.
So I did. I unbolted all my docks, and they brought them up and put them up on the shoreline. And I did. I hung out. I know Sunday it poured like, I didn't go back over on Sunday. It was raining like, I'm like, I'm not going to stand in the rain. What do I need to do that for? That's not my cup of tea.
Well, Kevin, I promise you we'll discuss it.
That's all I ask.
And, we'll take it up and let you know what we come up with.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming over.
Let us move on. Approval of the May 10th board minute meetings.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Rosenthal,
A second.
Mr. Bergstresser.
Any discussion, revision? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, we have our first report of our new executive director, Mr. Smollett.
I've had a great month here getting to know all the members of the board, all the members of the senior staff, and all of the employees of the district. And it was a fantastic opportunity to go around to all the district sites, to meet everyone and to see everything. And then make a put a dent in my 30, 60, and 90-day goals of listening, thinking, and then acting in all the district matters. And I had a great opportunity to interact with the executive chamber personnel in the programs, as well as the assistant secretary the deputy secretary of the environment, Venetia Lannon. I also had a great opportunity to go out, as I mentioned, and meet 3 of the 5 counties in the Black River area, be able to go out and let them know information from the district regarding the future assessments. That was also very, I think, a good experience to meet and understand stakeholders' concerns. Lastly, we went to the Black River Watershed Conference, and were able to meet another interested stakeholder group in the Black River area. We intend to do the same thing on the Hudson River side, is to go out and meet some of the county personnel that are responsible for paying the assessments, and to continue to try to build that bridge of good positive relations with those. But I really want to also thank the board for the confidence in my appointment as executive director, and I hope to do the very best that I can for the board, for staff, for the employees of the district, but most importantly, the people and the public beneficiaries that are out there. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments, questions for Robert?
I have none.
Just that it's appropriate that his first presentation at this board meeting is Flag Day. And I won't labor this meeting by going into your background, but I will state publicly, it's an extensive military background with service to our country, and we appreciate that service to our country. Not to mention your service to our board. But.
Anything else? Contracts, resolution to approve the insurance premium for July 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 17. Mr. Ferrara.
Mr. Chairman, my memo, which really doesn't say a whole lot, is on page 64. Basically, as has been the history of getting proposals for the insurance and the timing, this memo has generally left the actual amount of the proposal for the next fiscal year off. I did provide each of the board members, I believe, a copy from Cool Insuring of the proposal for any premium comparison for the insurance that will be expiring as of the end of the year, June 30th, 2016, and for the new fiscal year starting July of this year. That proposal, the expiring amount was $192,249, and the proposal, and I've confirmed with the Vice President over at Cool Insuring that $194,437 will be the amount, and will be the amount that I will ask the board to resolve at this meeting. There's also breakdowns of the principal component areas of the insurance property, the boiler, machinery, so on and so forth, ending with the continuing $10 million umbrella amount that the district carries. And that amount is $194,437, which I believe is about a 1.02% increase. So it's the smallest increase we've had over the years. It's a very difficult area to underwrite. The dam structures are very unique. So I think we continue to do a good job there. As I've also reported to the board many years, I am not an insurance expert, certainly in this area. Cool Insuring has done a tremendous job working with initially the consultant to put the RFP together, and the consultant group, Compass, they are experts in insuring and insuring the components and structures that we have at the district. So I recommend the board approve this next premium year, and if the board has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, just one. What do they mean by inland marine?
It's interesting. Inland marine is not just it's generally the boats we carry.
We have $483,000 worth of.
But we actually have, that also includes all the other equipment, and I anticipated that question. I have a state schedule of equipment. It includes the Caterpillar backhoe,
Oh, all right.
Ford tractor, all the boats, as I mentioned, the Kubota lawn tractor. So there's some significant items in there. The John Deere, I think, excavator is the biggest item in there at $125,000.
Okay, thanks.
Wow.
It seems like an exorbitant amount for both.
Inland, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve the insurance premiums.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Neto and Mr. Rosenthal.
Any further discussion? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next one is a board motion to authorize staff to seek a proposal to complete the additional engineering work as part of contract C032013 Bourbon Associates to perform site-specific probable maximum flood analysis. Mr. Pulte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My memorandum begins on page 66, the board package. The board will recall in 2015, Bergman Associates completed safety inspection and first engineering assessment for Indian Lake Dam. A summary of the conclusions, recommendations of that inspection and the assessment were provided to the board by staff in January 2016, and in April, staff presented a summary of the dam safety and maintenance compliance issues that Bergman had identified in its engineering assessment report. The bullet items outline the compliance issues. Generally, they center around hydraulic capacity, the ability to pass the maximum design flows, the hydraulic capacity with regard to low-level outlet discharge capacities, and spillway stability, overturning and sliding resistance. Those items need to be addressed, and so staff is recommending completing certain tasks using Bergman. The contract that we currently have with Bergman actually discusses the bulk of these tasks as additional work. So to some extent, the way has been paved, but it certainly is appropriate to have Bergman, who is identified and familiar with the project, continue on with that design as the contract had intended. The largest of the additional work tasks is, as the title might suggest, the specific site-specific probable maximum precipitation analysis, which will allow us hopefully to refine site-specifically the amount of water that comes into the project, which is used to determine the maximum design high water elevation at the project. And from that, we would then be able to design the other features which Bergman has identified as not compliant with DEC's dam safety regulations, including new head gates, operators, new bulkhead gate structure, and a methodology to reduce seepage through the stone dam structure, as well as some smaller items, including trash racks and a seepage flow collection monitoring system for the embankment structure.
I'm just curious, how big is this dam? How tall?
It's about 40 feet high, stone structure. The earthen embankment is somewhat smaller, but it does approach that height near the non-overflow dam portion. And it's about 120 feet of spillway length. So, originally constructed in the late 1800s. And
By hand.
By hand,
yeah,
and lasting the test of time.
yes, it
basically.
has. Yeah. So far. And it is time for some upgrades, and certainly the regulations have changed quite a bit since the time that it was originally constructed. So Staff recommends using Bergman to complete the tasks that I've just outlined and seeks board authorization to request a scope of work and a fee proposal from Bergman to complete the supplemental
Right,
engineering.
we're not voting on a contract, just
Correct.
soliciting the
It's
contract.
a
Correct.
amendment, it's gonna be it's an amendment to the contract, to come back to the board with the proposal as well as the fee estimate for your authorization before amending the contract.
Need a motion?
I'll
Yeah.
make that motion.
Mr. Rosenthal. Mr. Neto.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And lastly, in contracts, a resolution to recommend and conditionally award Conklinville Dam grouting and concrete repair and design work. Mr. Coltan again.
Thank you. The memo begins on page 68. Then in December, the board authorized staff to procure engineering service to complete design necessary to reduce or eliminate seepage through the spillway foundation at Conklinville and the removal and replacement of deteriorated concrete. And consistent with the state procurement guidelines, staff evaluated the 3 most highly qualified engineering firms who have submitted annual statement of qualifications. From that set of 3, we evaluated as a team and determined that Schnabel Engineering is the highest qualified engineering firm for the work. And the evaluation team recommends conditionally awarding the work to Schnabel Engineering and seeks board acceptance of the evaluation team's recommendation and authorization to request a scope of work and to negotiate a contract with Schnabel, subject to the board approval.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Any
Mr.
further
Neto.
discussion?
Nope.
Again, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Staff and committee reports, report of the audit committee, Mr. Bergstresser.
All right, I'd like to bring to the full board a resolution to exercise an option and amend the audit services agreement C012014, which we went over and everybody was aware of. I don't know if you want
Is there a second to that?
to expound on it?
No.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Report of the finance committee, Mr. Neto.
Thank you. As you all heard earlier, we have put forward to the board a resolution to adopt both the Hudson River area and state share annual assessments for July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017. And if there's
Can I ask a question before we?
Sure.
Back on page 13.
Mhm.
It says the state Hudson River Regulating District, all it lists is Great Sacandaga Lake. Have we separated Indian Lake from Great Sacandaga, or is that just a typo?
It's been, historically, it's been the practice of the district to identify, the operation as such.
I mean, the resolution says their operation and maintenance of storage reservoirs,
Right.
and then over there it gets broken down as to just Great Sacandaga. It's just listed as Great Sacandaga. I was just curious.
It has,
It's been like
as far as I
that
know,
since-
historically, it's always been listed that way in
Right.
terms of the assessment, with the
Mhm.
understanding that it covers the full operation of the Hudson River area reservoirs.
Really?
so it includes Indian Lake.
The first assessment
Includes
sheet, I
Indian Lake.
believe in 1920-something,
1924 for the
24,
construction.
it was stated exactly word for word as the current
Could we
state.
Is
All of the parcels of real estate that are beneficiaries,
Yeah.
that are downstream of Indian Lake are also downstream of Sacandaga.
Okay.
And the costs associated with operating Indian Lake are de minimis
I'm sure.
compared to the cost of doing a headwater benefit determination or separate assessment of the,
Hamilton County is not assessed in the Hudson River area.
Okay.
and the gorge coming out of Indian Lake is relatively
Mhm.
narrow and there's a small floodplain.
Okay.
I mean, kind of how we addressed the Hudson River apportionment long ago.
I was just curious when I read it. I thought it sounded a little funny. You know, the resolution's worded one way and then the assessments are worded differently. Okay, thanks.
Any further comment? Questions? All right, so again, just move to the full board.
I'll make them.
We have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Bye.
Any opposed? Governance Committee, Mr. Rosenthal.
So that was for
That's-
both,
that's
that's
both
state and the Hudson River
Yes.
area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you need two separate?
No, you don't, no.
No, we'll just
You could do
double
it.
them up.
Got it.
You heard discussion in the committee report, a proposed revision to the management exempt guidelines plan, which really concerns the dental plan. So I would entertain a motion for approval of that revised guideline.
Make that motion.
Mr. Bergstrasser. Yeah, second that.
All
Mr.
in
Hayes.
favor signify by saying aye.
You wanna take over there? You wanna take over there, Chair?
Taking
Oh,
over.
Jesus. It's all right. I'm sorry. Let me take that back.
I had to do that.
I had to do that.
I'm glad you did. Chair, Mr. Chair, my apologies.
Accept. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Let me have that gavel for just a few
I
more
know it, I
seconds.
know it. General Counsel's report, Mr. Leslie.
Oh, let's see. The Erie Boulevard and Borlex appeals have gone well so far. As you know, we had a motion to intervene into that case by the New York State Attorney General, which was subsequently granted. On May 17th, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit granted a Borlex motion for them to withdraw their appeal. So they are no longer part of the appeal, leaving only Erie, which is good news for us. Erie's brief is due June 15th. FERC's brief is going to be due August 15th, and we will then have an opportunity to throw in our few pages on August 22nd. With regard to NIMO, executed stipulations of settlement have been received from Onondaga, Herkimer, and Hamilton counties. So those state-based cases are completely done at this point. They've been filed. We're waiting on the executed stipulation of settlement order from the federal court, the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of New York. Expect that soon. Soon could be 3 days or 3 months. And it doesn't really matter to us a whole lot. We have agreed not to assess NIMO under the current apportionment. They're not named in the Hudson River area apportionment, and although they are named in the Black River area apportionment, we're taking steps to change that apportionment. So as long as we don't send out an assessment this July, naming NIMO will be in compliance with that stipulation of settlement. So that's good news.
Excellent.
Take any questions, I guess.
Any questions, comments?
I suppose just an outlandish kind of, is there a risk if we don't assess them and they decide to not sign the stip?
They have signed the stip already.
Oh, okay.
We have signed the stip. The only one that hasn't signed
Sure.
it yet is the
Federal
U.S.
court.
magistrate.
Okay.
If you can refresh my recollection, what's the basis for excluding NIMO? Is it because their properties are unused?
Their properties are vacant, and it was part of a negotiated settlement with them to end the 20-something years of litigation. We basically said we would not assess them going forward.
But they don't actively operate any hydro facilities and stuff? They separated those assets?
Right.
Okay.
Due to deregulation, they got rid of their generating facilities, and were left with a bunch of vacant properties that,
Have been the subject of litigation.
they own, but they don't generate power.
Any other questions, comments?
Do we still assess properties for potential head or anymore, or are we
In the
Well-
new apportionment,
in a new apportionment?
We will not.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks.
Correct.
Next, compliance officer, Mr. Zicki.
Thank you. My report can be found on page 71. Our fourth quarter utilization report was accepted by ESD. We are now in the first quarter of our fiscal year 16-17. Today, our utilization is around 30,000. I anticipate that additional spend will come through some upcoming projects we have at SFO. We will be receiving a report card this month that comes from the Chamber and ESD to gauge our effectiveness and our effort for the MWBE program. So I am looking forward to that. As a reminder, on pages 72, 73, and 74, you will find the contract status reports. They are there for your review, and their inclusion satisfies Public Authority Law Section 2879. Our Albany lease agreement contract was approved by both AG and OSC, and that gets us through February of 2018. And finally, the Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Business Program, we are having some difficulty with them. We are only required to have a 6% spend for the year. I have reached out to a few different businesses. One was interested and then changed their mind and said no. The business has since closed. So I am working on that, trying to get a little creative with how we will come up with our 6%. If you have any questions, if not, that completes my report.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on pages 75 to 139. As usual, I'll focus on my financial summary, which is on page 75. Again, cash flow, as you can see, for the period ended May 31st, the fund balances remain fairly robust, closing at $2,722,829 in the Hudson River area and $1,321,719 in the black. Those funds have basically are most representative of our very excellent cash flow status as of through that period. Cash flow, the other cash flow reports for future periods also indicate a stable cash flow situation and better in both areas. As I reported leading up to this month, we have successfully collected all of our state and federal assessments for the past, or actually for this year ending. I'm currently, once we get back to the office, we'll be preparing the Hudson River area assessments for the counties, and also the Headwaters benefit fee invoices for this upcoming year for July 1, 2016 through June 30th, and those are for the three former hydro entities, Boralex, Erie Boulevard, and Albany Engineering. They're in the 400,000 and 400 and I believe 70-something thousand range. Those will also be set to be collected by October 31st. So we've kind of lined up all of our assessments to be received at the same due date. On the New York State Administration side, which I principally discuss the public authority reporting requirements, the big, what I've historically called the big report, which involves our investment report, the procurement, the annual report, the certified audit, and the OSC, what they call the OSC data request, which largely delves into debt, which based on timing, I'm not sure whether or not we even have to report anything, because the debt would only have to be discussed for anything that we actually had on the books as of this June 30th. So based on how the EFC funding is going for the Conkerville project, I'm not sure there'll be officially any debt on the books. I see Rob shaking his head no, I'm thinking the same. But those reports are due by September 30th, and generally, the issue for those reports has always been the certified audit, which generally gets done by that point, but the board has not been reported to until generally after that time, and we're generally pretty successful in getting our independent auditor to give us a completed report prior to you guys actually hearing their report back, probably not scheduled till November or December. So we look very good there. Network activity status, we've been undergoing a security assessment review, which is required by the state. It's essentially completed. The only thing that's left, which is not, it's not a small part of it, but it's something that once we get the credentials for our virtual private network, which is the type of network that we have across our three main locations, which is Mayfield, Albany, and Watertown. Once we get those credentials, then Tag Solutions can get in and make sure that there isn't anything not in terms of protocol correct with that VPN network, which I can pretty confidently tell you that there was no issue with that network at all. But they'll give us the independent sign-off on that, and I expect that to happen, and I'll before the next meeting, so I'll report hopefully the completion of that assessment review. Last thing I'll mention is the data migration to move us from the current permit system database, which is sitting in Access, thank you, which is being migrated over to MySQL Server. We've been reported that from the vendor that we'll have a beta version of that sometime towards the end of June. Hopefully, again, if that happens in July, we'll be reporting probably some fairly definitive timing as to how we'll migrate off of the Access database onto the new database, and hopefully get that behind us. And unless the board has any questions, that is my report. And I will only, if you have any questions.
No, very good. Any other
Okay.
questions?
On page 140, there are some board expenses. $664.68 for Mr. Bergstresser and $174.53 for Mr. Neto that I need the board to address.
Do you have a motion to accept that?
Yeah, make that motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Rosenthal.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chief Engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Report begins on page 141. The month of May summarized as dry, both in the Hudson and Black River area. 40 to 60% of historic precip in the Hudson, and not much better to about 60 to 65% in the Black River area. And one would guess the inflow to our reservoirs are lower than historic average, about 50% in the Hudson and about 50% in the Black River area. That being said, pulling up some information from June, rather than sticking to the report, we had quite a bit of rain the first week or so in June, and currently the reservoirs are very close to, if not right on target. And Sacandaga is about a half a foot below target. Indian Lake is actually just slightly above our target elevation, and Stillwater Reservoir is about 0.2 of a foot off of historic average target elevation. And the Fulton chain are right on money. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I got a question. I was approached by the owners of the Water's Edge. There are 2 docks out in front of that hotel. And they are curious as to ownership of the docks, because they're in need of repair. Any idea? Do we own those, or does the town? I know they weren't there originally. I remember when that was a 6-stall boathouse. It was there as part of the property before they put the hotel up.
It's my understanding that the district has state land under its jurisdiction, that it does extend at least as far as, if not toward the middle of, if you will, the that hotel area.
Yeah, but the lake
including
versus
waterfront.
those two dock structures are
As far as
apples and oranges.
the dock structures are concerned, I don't know any history or district involvement in construction of those.
I know the boardwalk belongs to the town of Webb.
Yep.
And I'm gonna guess that those docks do also.
The boardwalk closest to the dam,
Right.
I believe we had contact in the past with the
Mhm.
town with regard to
Right.
their maintenance of them, or replacement of
Oh,
them.
I'm sure the owners are
But,
looking for somebody to pay to repair the docks
Yeah.
in front of their hotel. But,
Good luck with that.
I'll look into it on the town board and see what I can find out. I was just curious as to if you knew anything.
Nothing about the docks.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. The Hudson River and Black River Administrator, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 175. Everything's operating normal in both areas. A few encroachments we're dealing with in the Great Sacandaga Lake. And I attended a meeting at Jefferson County, apportionment with staff and county officials. Took a tour. I also attended with the board chair, ED, his CFO, and the chief engineer. He toured Hudson River, Black River Regulating District facilities. And work continues on the new garage in Stillwater. We're getting ready to pour the floor, actually. And my goal is to have it winterized before snow falls. Everything goes right. I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
Any questions?
Not at this time. Unless you know something about those docks in front of, unless you know something about those docks in front of the water tower.
No, I don't.
I think they're made out of wood.
Yeah, it could be.
Board member questions and comments. I want to read a letter that came to me. We all hear enough negative stuff. It's time, in August 2015, I was looking at a camp on North Shore Road. I heard there was a dispute over the beach rights with the adjoining permit holder. I stopped in, spoke to John Hodgins about this permit. He said the only problem he saw was the fact that they were private roads leading to the permit area. I had no legal right-of-way to use the road. John said to get a legal right-of-way or do not buy the camp. In December 15, I received the legal right-of-way to use the roads and closed on the camp. In May of 2016, I met the adjoining permit holder. He informed me he was going to park a boat trailer in the road and block me from getting to my permit. I informed him it was a private road and I had the legal right-of-way to use it. We parted as friends. I can't thank John enough for helping me out in this. I also had the pleasure of dealing with Sue, Dan, Danielle, and extremely dedicated and professional employees. Yours truly, John Schultz. So, put that in the record. It's very nice. Resolution for our next board meeting, which is September 12th in Northville, I believe.
Correct.
July meeting?
July. Did I say? What did I say?
September.
Oh, because I have a note on the September.
And everyone went along with you, that's okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
September.
We were hoping to.
We know what the resolution
The
says.
July board meeting on July 12th in Northville. Motion?
So moved.
Mr. Hayes.
Second?
Second.
All in
Mr.
favor?
Meadow.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'd like a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make it.
Mr. Rosenthal.
I'll
Sec-
second.
All in fa- and,
Clerk Stresser.
we're going into executive session, as I said before, to discuss labor contracts, and there will probably be no business conducted after the executive session.